Welcome to Corwin's Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast with host Peter DeWitt. This podcast is from education leaders for education leaders. Every week, Peter and our guests get together to share ideas, put research into practice, and ensure every student is learning, not by chance, but by design.
Mike Nelson, it's good to see you.
Hey, Peter DeWitt.
How are you?
You know what? Where I'm at right now, it's sunny and very warm. I'm in a short sleeve shirt. I see you are too. So hopefully it's that way where you are.
Well, let's just say it's warmer than it has been in upstate New York. It's about 66 degrees, and I ran in a short sleeve shirt today, so that was a good thing. But I still had gloves on. So, but yes, I'm glad that you're warm and getting some sun. That's good. So I want to thank you for our guest that is on, Jeff Utecht. He's a consultant, and I don't feel like that fairly articulates who he is because of his vast knowledge around technology. And but you've known him for quite a long time. He was incredibly interesting to actually talk to. But talk to us a little bit about how did you meet Jeff?
Well, Jeff is an amazing human being. So I have had the pleasure of working with him and known him for, more than a decade. And, Peter, I was superintendent in the town that raised me in Enumclaw for 14 years. And in the early part of that tenure, we were moving toward technology. And um, I didn't want technology brought in to just have technology brought in. I wanted technology brought in through the instructional lens to really make a difference for students and student learning. And I don't know if you know this about me, Peter, but I vetted a lot of people before we said yes to who we brought in, and who we brought in was Jeff Utecht. And so what makes Jeff different than any other consultant, presenter in the area of technology is that he was a classroom teacher, and he speaks through the lens of a teacher. So even if he's giving a leadership answer, Peter, he dives right down into how that can make a difference for a teacher and the students within their classroom. And he worked with us nonstop for several years and prepared us for, in Washington State, March 13th, 2020, when our governor said our schools were shutting down because of the pandemic. And we were ready. We were ready because of Jeff.
Yeah, he sounds like he really was able to step in. And one of the things that I know I want listeners to listen for is how he actually prepared himself. When you asked that question at the very beginning, because it was a great question, I was not expecting him to tell the story that he told. And it was just a really good life lesson about how his experiences helped lead up to how he kind of jumped in when the pandemic happened. So yeah, it was fantastic. What do you I need to ask you this, Mike, because you vetted a lot of people. So I'm feeling very honored actually because we have a book together and stuff. So I'm feeling pretty
I had to make sure you were an okay guy first. So yes,
I'm feeling
I did check you out.
feeling pretty proud of myself. Um in this interview, when you think about like listeners being a listener, and you're a really, really good listener, um, what do you want people to listen for when they're hearing us have a conversation with Jeff?
You know what I think Jeff makes clear and is here's how you can change as an individual person and gain more knowledge in the area of technology. And of course, right now the generative AI is taking off like mad. So here's what I can do. But then he weaves in so masterfully how you can lead it. So
Mhm.
you really need to go through that lens of this is a time that I need to be a learner at a very high level, but I also am a leader, and I need to be thinking through systems and structures and strategies that I can lead those that I'm leading. So
Yeah. So thank you for that because you always have a thoughtful response when I ask you those things. And yeah, this was a great
it's a
interview.
great one.
Yeah. So um, everybody, Jeff Utecht, and it a fantastic discussion about more than just AI, but definitely AI is definitely a part of it.
If you're a school leader looking to sharpen your leadership abilities, a personalized workshop led by an accredited consultant can help. Corwin can equip you with the tools to become a leader that inspires those around you. Get started at corwin.com.
Jeff Utecht, it is so great to have you here on Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. We are thrilled to have you with us. Peter, wouldn't you agree?
Of course, I would agree. I mean, we asked him on, so yeah, Jeff. Actually, I've been following your work recently and just reading so much about what you're doing and love all of it. I just love how you approach things and your perspective. So I'm really interested in this conversation for sure.
All right, Jeff, we're going to take you back to a time when you did not know Peter DeWitt. So
Okay.
I'm
Which
going
was
to take
like
you back
3
in
weeks
time.
ago.
Yes, that's not true. So I want to take you back to March 13th, 2020.
Okay.
And for listeners, Jeff and I both reside in Washington State. And March 13th, 2020 is when the governor came out and said, we're going to take a pause on public education. We're going to do, slow the curve. It's going to be a 2-week pause. And then we knew quickly it was in our state, moved to a 6-week pause. And then it was, we're going to close down schools for the remainder of the 1920 school year.
Mm.
Jeff, you worked in the district in which I was superintendent, and you supported us in a one-to-one and helping teachers see that connection between, technology use and instruction and learning. And we were set up pretty well to make that shift. But very quickly, your phone rang off the hook. I know without a shadow of a doubt that it rang off the hook. I want to know, to all the other leaders, what were you thinking in that moment? And how did you so quickly, because listeners, he quickly scaled up and he was the guru in Washington State as people went to virtual learning. So our leaders need to know that, Jeff. So how did you think in a leader's mindset about that?
Wow, it's such a great question. And thank you both. It is an honor to be here and talk about leadership in education, something that I am still learning about. I think as we all are. And just thinking back to that time, Mike, it is such a blur at this point, because to your point, it went from March 13th in our state to a year and a half of supporting teachers. And I think the place where I like to start is the first thing that I thought was, here we go again. And I need to explain that to people here for just a second. But from a leadership perspective, I think it's always going back to what has happened in my past that I can lean on for the future. And in that moment in time, March 13th hits, and I had contracts with a lot of different school districts. I'm a full-time consultant, educational consultant, and one of the contracts was with your school district, Mike, as well. But I had all these contracts where I'm supposed to be going in and doing professional development. And of course, instantly overnight, they all dry up. Like, I'm not traveling anywhere. Nothing's happening anymore. And I'm looking at my wife, and the federal government came out and said that you can take your house loan and put it into deferral. And we filled out that paperwork, and we're just like, this is what's going to happen. So there's that side of it happening where I'm just like, uh-oh. But there's the educational leader side of me that was, here we go again. And why I say that is this was, which is shocking, and talk about being in the right place at the right time, or having a history that you can go back and pull from. And for me, this was my 4th time in emergency shutdown of education. So a little background on me, my wife and I were overseas for 10 years. And in our overseas travels for 10 years, we spent our first 3 years in Saudi Arabia. And in Saudi Arabia from 2002 to 2005, it was the height of terrorism in Saudi Arabia. And 2 of the 3 years that we were there, due to terrorism, we did not finish the school year. And so we had to do remote emergency learning to get our high school kids graduated, to get SAT testing. Now, take you back to 2003 and 2004 when this happened. We're talking dial-up modem and flip phones. That's what we're talking about here. We had set up a Moodle install, which if you don't know what Moodle is, you can think of today it's called Google Classroom is probably the equivalent that most people know, but we set that up quickly and we were able to still graduate our seniors. And I went through that experience and we fumbled our way through that one and learned a lot. My wife and I moved to Shanghai, China, just in time for SARS to hit. If anybody remembers this, in 2006, SARS breaks out in China. And the school I'm working at all of a sudden says, we need to get ready to shut down. If the government of China shuts us down for SARS, we need to be able to go online. And I was able to say, well, actually, I just did this 2 years ago. We're going to set up a Moodle install. Here's what the training the teachers need. Here's how you get stuff. And again, this is a little different time period. We're in China. The internet's a little bit faster. We're still on flip phones. But every kid at our school didn't have a device yet, but most families had a device, or, laptops were a little more out there. And so we prepared all of our teachers. We went through a whole training model and we ended up not shutting down. But the interesting thing was, even though we didn't shut down, all of a sudden we trained all these teachers on being able to teach in what we would call a blended learning environment back in the day. And so we started to leverage that in the school. And a year and a half later, we went 1-to-1. So at this American International School in Shanghai, we were 1-to-1 program in our middle schools and high schools back in 2006, 2007. And then my wife and I moved to Bangkok. And due to political unrest and a 1,000-year flood, we ended up having to shut down schools for a month. And it's now, 2010, we now have flip phones, we now have smartphones. This is after the iPhone comes out. We have iPads. Every student at our school had a public facing blog. We had something like Moodle, the next version of what Google Classroom was about to become before all that came out. And so for a month, we had to pivot again online and support teachers across my school in doing that. And so when this pandemic hits on March 13th, I literally was thinking to myself, well, here we go again. And so I quickly went to my blog, which I've been blogging since 2005. And I wrote a quick blog post to just say, here's what you need to do. Here's the step 1, step 2, and getting going. My phone starts ringing off the hook. And so lucky for me, I already had this experience to lean on. And whenever we find ourselves in a rapidly changing environment, I think having things that, whatever it is, mine just happened to be that, but whatever it is, you can look back and there's usually parts of something that our lived experience, which is so important, that we can start to lean on and pull from. And then from that moment, we ended up ramping up here just in the state of Washington. We supported 176 school districts and trained over 22,000 teachers. That's just in our state alone. From there, we supported a bunch of other states and a bunch of international schools through that as well. I called on my network. I know that you are both big on networks as well. And any teacher that I come across in my trainings, you in your school district, I reached out to a couple of your teachers who were I knew were in the mental space where I could ramp up, and hired 12 consultants. And they're the real heroes, because I'm thinking specifically of a 4th grade teacher who was still trying to learn to teach her 4th graders online, and at the same time supporting all of these other educators trying to do their work. I mean, they were the real heroes around that, and to quickly get everybody up to speed and put together a training model that we could support teachers, and be able to do that for a year and a half was just an incredible experience. And learned so much, as we all did, I think, through that we want to take forward into education. There's some trauma, of course, that we're trying to still, I think, get over, but there's so many experiences that I think we learned from that situation that we can, as leaders, take forward with us when we think about and I think this is a big question we're asking ourselves now: what is the real purpose of education? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big question that came out of that time. And now, as we start into this era of AI, I think it's a question we're asking ourselves again: what is the real purpose of education?
I'm so glad Mike ignored the questions that I sent and asked you that question.
Because now we know who to blame the pandemic on.
Yeah, well, that's right.
That's what
it's really just one person.
Just one person.
That's what I'm thinking right now. I'm actually thinking 2 things. Number 1, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I would never travel with Jeff anywhere in the world.
That's great.
Your wife deserves like a medal and everything.
Yes, yes, she does.
Because she's not to blame. You clearly are. So everywhere you show up. But now I'm
Yeah.
actually thinking a second thing about your mindset because so my brother actually lives in Middle East and
Mm,
he lives in Qatar right now, but he lived in Saudi Arabia for 13 years
Mm,
and he moved there in 1993. And one of the things that I remembered, I mean, I think back now, he was 23 years old, or he was like 25 years old when he moved there.
yeah.
And back then, no flip phones, no nothing.
Yeah.
And he was on vacation and his compound got blown up by a van. And I remember like my mom and I were trying to get in touch with him and we couldn't get in touch with him. It was, $4 a minute to talk to him on the
Yeah.
phone. And then years later, he lived in Cairo. And so you and my brother will never get together because you guys just bring stuff all wherever you go. In Cairo, and he had to, by the time we got there, we had like the calling card you could get it for a
Right.
minute. And then, computers came in and I taught my mom how to get on the computer. I taught her how to do Facebook. And he was in Cairo and he had to flee the country overnight because of civil unrest. And I remember going to the computer in my office and he had checked into a hotel in Italy, which he never did. Like he never wanted people to know where he was and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I went out of the office, came back, and I had already said, wow, good for you. And my sister texted me and said, do you have a minute? And she said, Jody had to flee the night before. And when I looked at Facebook again, my mom had typed, I'm glad you're safe. And I thought
Mm,
back to 1993 when like it took a good week to get a line to get in touch with him to now being able to see my mom just interact with him right away on Facebook. And I think for me, when I'm thinking about technology and all that stuff, I know that there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, but there's also, to me, that powerful positive story. And my question for you, because I'm just going to throw out any question that we're
yeah.
gonna we're gonna talk about. I know that you had gone through that situation, but just take us back to Saudi Arabia because that March 13th for most people was your Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
right? Most people had not been through that. What went through your mind to not be enabled and be like, we have to totally shut down to be able to step in and say, no, we're not going to step down. These kids still need something and we're going to move forward with it. Like, what is it in your mindset, do you think? Have you done that kind of reflection to be able to say, no, we're not going to shut down. We're actually going to figure this out at a time when technology was, I mean, at that time, technology was great, but there were a
Yeah.
lot of limitations to it. What went through your mind?
Yeah. I think part of it is just my mindset. In general, I've always been a try to figure it out kind of person. I do a lot of home improvement projects. I try to figure stuff out. And that is just part of my mindset is, we talk a lot about, especially in education, we talk this idea about a growth mindset. And I think one of the misconceptions that there is around this idea of growth mindset, if we can just go there for a second, is this idea that you're either all growth or you're all fixed. And
Yeah.
I think the research will show you that it's not that. It's that there are parts of all of us that are a growth mindset, and there's parts of us that are still a fixed mindset. I like to use the example of cooking, right? My wife could have just gone to the grocery store and the refrigerator could be packed. And I open up the refrigerator and I say to myself, there's nothing to eat in this house because I don't have a growth mindset on how do I bring stuff together and what do I want to create with this and what does this look like? And I feel like when it comes to technology, a lot of people talk about having a growth mindset, but it's that idea of willing to dig in. So
Mm.
that's number one. Number two is I'm always about what's best for kids and what are we doing to support kids. And I think for any leader in education, that is our mindset. And so when I think back to Saudi Arabia, there's two things that come to mind. Number one, what can I rely on that I know is good pedagogical understanding?
Mhm.
And number two, how then do I apply that to whatever situation that I'm in? I'm a big project-based learning person. I'm a big inquiry-based learning person. I love asking kids big, rough questions and having them wrestle with them. And so being able to take what I knew to be good pedagogical understanding and then trying to figure out how do I make technology fit the understanding that I want?
Mhm.
And I think that question alone is different than a lot of people look at technology. I feel like a lot of people take technology and say, okay, how do I take what I do and make it fit this tool?
Mhm.
Instead of saying, here's my leadership style, here's what I want to accomplish. How do I make technology work for me, not me work for it?
Mhm.
And I think when I think back to that original time in Saudi and all these times, it was like, this is the technology we have, whatever it happened to be at the time. How do I manipulate the technology in a way that works best for me and ultimately best for our students? And I think for me, through all of this, that has been the mindset of whatever tools we have. How do we leverage it so I have technology working for me and not me working for it? And of course, there's a learning curve in that, and being able to go through that learning curve is a huge part of leadership, of just, I've got to dig in and learn something new. But I think for me, that it's that mindset of just, how do I make this stuff work for me and not me work for it? And then dig into it and figure out what needs to happen, and fail a lot along the way and be okay with that.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Peter, you can see why we hired him in Enumclaw, because there's very few people that have the knowledge and expertise in the world and the mindset in the world of technology and new technology. But also, did you hear him weave all of the student learning throughout his answer? It was pretty amazing. So,
Oh, thank
Jeff,
you.
uh, what we just led into the first part of this podcast was there was an emergent time, and it was an emergent time, and we all needed to get on board. There wasn't much choice. So when you were standing up in front of people, they were like, I have to know what you're telling me, and I have to implement it tomorrow because I have students waiting for me.
Yeah.
That's very different than before March 13th.
Mm.
And it's probably a little bit different even now, as with the implementation of, or the launch of, generative AI. So help us understand. I've seen it in action, but use words for our listeners on the podcast. How do you help guide people who may not be the early adopters, not that fourth grade teacher that you talked about? How do you guide them without judgment, but making sure that you're nudging them to next levels?
That's a really good question. And especially, when it comes to technology, I find myself in these situations a lot. Selling stuff to the early adopters in the technology world is the easy part. It's trying to get that, main middle. That is the hard part. But I think, again, there's a couple things that I constantly go back and lean on. And I think part of it is my wife is a 20-year school counselor. And every time I'm going off to do a consultancy, she always wishes me out the door. And the last thing she says to me is, don't forget to be a good listener.
Mhm.
And it's the last thing that I leave every time leaving my house to go out and do a consultancy. It's the words of advice from a 20-year school counselor to don't forget to listen. And I think that advice is critical. When you are trying to move from early adopters to the middle, it's all about listening and understanding and then making it personal. Those are the three things that I try to lean on. And especially when it comes to technology, the work that I'm doing now, even around generative AI, it's about, how do I take this incredibly powerful tool that I know is powerful for everybody, but I've got to some way listen to your fears, understand where you're coming from, and then I've got to show you some way that this tool can personally impact you. And folks, that's no different than what we do with kids in the classroom. It really
That's what,
is.
that's
It's
what I was
just,
like. Oh my
it,
gosh, that's
it's
good.
just good
That's a
pedagogical
teacher's
strategies. Yeah.
playbook.
Yeah, it's a teacher's playbook. And it works for me as well, of being able to just listen to people. And I mean, really listen to people.
Mm.
And when you really, step back and listen and try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand, I have enough technology background that I know enough that I can find a way to weave in why you want this tool. Here's a good example. Even today, the way that I set up my generative AI trainings is, we know right now, teachers always have been, but right now we know that teachers are feeling stressed. They're feeling overworked. There's this we have this real sense of mental health inside of the teaching practice that we are really focused in on. And knowing that, because listening to teachers and doing the reading that we're all doing and the work that you are doing as well, we know that that's an issue. And so even when I go into my generative AI trainings, I don't talk about the technology. I talk about what if, and this is usually how I open my sessions, what if I could save you 3 hours a week doing the work that you had to do anyway? What would you do with an extra 3 hours? Would you take care of yourself? Would you take care of your children? My goal is to get you out from behind the computer and give you time back. And even by just framing my sessions that way, I am speaking to the stress, the anxiety, and I will have buy-in from the beginning of, okay, if I can get through the learning curve, there's going to be time back to me. And that's really what I want. I want time with my students. I want time with my family. I want whatever that stressor is, I will have more time in my life. And so even the way we understand what are those stressors in people's lives and figuring out a way of how do you even mentally prepare them for whatever you're training or whatever we need to accomplish today, how is that going to support them in whatever they're dealing with, I think is a great approach to be thinking about as well.
So I want to follow up on that a little bit, Jeff, because Mike and I have been doing a lot of talking, a lot of research. We're sharing, Harvard Business Review articles and everything else, and studying AI every day and using it actually, and trying to find a natural way to use it within workshops and all of that. One of the concerns, just like when you were talking about, your mindset going into things, is um, a little worried that AI is going to be used at a very surface level and people are going to miss the point.
Mm,
And, we've been hearing a lot of people say we use it to write recommendations or we use it to write a newsletter. And I get that's going to help save time because
sure.
I'm a former principal, so I understand that. But it can be used for so much more. And it can be deeper. I read an article in Harvard Business Review a few months ago that said, it's an auto sapien. It is an extra partner. There are
Yeah.
four of us on the screen, not just three, right? When we're looking at AI that way. And we have to push back on it. And Mike and I are in the middle of reading Unmasking AI that talks about the equity and diversity part of it and too, and where it draws information from. How do you make sure that we move beyond just we are going to save time, and that's important, but use it at a deeper level? Because one of the concerns that I have is that when we talk about instructional strategies, when we talk about anything that's being used within the classroom or school, there are many times we're just still at that surface level in schools. And what we want to be able to do is use this to go deeper with the learning. So, how do you help people go beyond that and go deeper with their learning where this is concerned?
Yeah, great question. So I think for me, I think of it in levels, right? Level one is how can it save me time? It's personal to me.
Yeah.
And that's really the trainings that I'm still focused on doing a lot of today. I think right now in education at large, we're starting to move out of what I would consider tier one and starting to move into those tier two conversations, which is exactly what you're talking about. Because first we have to just understand, how do I even prompt this thing? And right now that is still a struggle that we are facing, because what I say a lot in my consultancy work is we first have to understand that for the last 30 years, you have been trained to talk to computers as if they're Google, because that's all we had.
Yeah.
And one of the issues that people have is they think that that's the way that you talk to this computer as well. And so I run into so many teachers who will tell me, oh, I tried it once and it didn't work. And I'll say, well, what did you ask it? And what they're putting in as is if they are talking to Google. Now, if you want to, you can do that. You're going to be at a very basic level, like you said, right? We have to understand that the way we interact with these generative AI tools, completely different way of talking, for lack of a better word, to our computers. So there's still keyword search. You need to know how to research. These are not research tools, they're creation tools.
Mhm.
Google is not going away. You're going to still need to know how to use Google. And really, these generative AIs are creation tools. When it comes to the idea of deeper learning, the thing that we are still, I think, in education struggling to really comprehend, and I hope that all leaders can start wrapping their head around this and thinking about how you can support your educators in this, is that what the G in GPT stands for is generative. And to your point, Peter, that to me is the power that gets us to deeper learning. when there can be 3 of us sitting around a table trying to come up with some ideas, and we have a thought partner, which is what I call it. We have a thought partner sitting here who can get outside of our 3 heads and create something that we could not, we don't even think that way. We don't even have the language to come up with these ideas, right? That's the generative nature. But the power of it is that when all 3 of us do that together, then it's not 3 of us, it's 6 of us. Because it's generative, we all get a unique, different response. And that is the power to deeper learning. Because I want teachers, and I use this example, I don't want teachers using it to create a lesson plan. I want a department to sit down together. And if you're a department of 4 educators, all 4 teachers are going to go to ChatGPT. All 4 teachers are going to ask it for a lesson plan. And now you've got 4 separate lesson plans with 4 highly trained teachers trying to figure out what is the one best lesson plan based off of these 4. And that's the idea. It's leaning into the generative part of it is what's going to get us to deeper thinking. Leaning into the generative part of it that gives different responses to every person every time is where critical thinking happens. It's where the deeper learning holds its strength. And even when we're using this in the classroom, I don't want teachers putting in a prompt for ChatGPT and then handing kids something. I want teachers creating starter prompts. We have to teach them how to do that. But once you know how to create a really good starter prompt, I want all of the students, if I've got 20 kids, every kid is going to copy and paste that prompt into whatever AI bot you want. And all of a sudden, I've got 20 different responses, 20 completely different responses. And now we're going to be talking to each other. Peter, how's your response different than my response? Mike, what did you get? Why do you think it said that to you? And we're going to critically analyze the resources we have. And then as an educator, my question to my class is, what's the next best prompt? What's your next best prompt? That's the critical thinking part of it, right? And here in the state of Washington and kind of everywhere now, we're hearing around AI, we're hearing this idea of a human-centered approach. And I'm helping to write the guidelines here in Washington State and a couple other states as well that haven't been released yet. But here in Washington State, we released our guidelines already. And what we're looking at is when we say human-centered approach, we're looking at this idea of HAIH, right? Human on the input, human empowerment on the human inquiry. How do I create a good prompt? What are the parts of a different prompt? Like we have to, all of that. It's all writing, by the way. It's every ELA standard is in the prompt. And then there's the AI does its thing. And the H on the other end is human empowerment. How do we take what the AI did and how does that empower us to think critically about what it did? And the power in that is understanding that every time we ask it something, we get a unique, specific response that has never been given before and will never be given again. And that's where the power lies when we think about deeper thinking around generative AI. We're building that skill set. That's the skill set that we're building. And it's going to take some time. That's a heavy lift. But once we get there, I think we're just going to see some incredible stuff happening in our classrooms around critical analyzing of data, deeper understanding of terms and concepts than we've been able to see before. Because within that entire process that I didn't talk about is like every kid can personalize it for them however they want within that process as well. And to me, that's the real power of these tools.
Mike and I we were in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and we were working with 60 principals over 2 days, and we were infusing AI into the discussion. There were about 20 of them that had not used it before, so we had them partner up with somebody else. And we've done that a few times, and it's really kind of exciting to see. I mean, the 20 who had never used it before signed on and got an account. I mean, it happened like that. And it's very exciting to see people sharing what they're learning together because they were yelling out to each other. This is what this is what it told me. Oh my gosh, and we've had that experience before. And that's pretty amazing when that happens, especially with adults. When you've got adults that kind of show up with a fear and then dive into it, and then they get this information that they weren't expecting, and then they're sharing it with their partners. It just creates a really great synergy among everybody where they're sharing and they're not afraid to share. Those are good moments when that happens.
I agree. And I'm seeing that. I mean, it is some of my favorite trainings I've done in a while, because I call them light bulb moments. And we all remember when we were educators, when you say that thing and you see, I was a fourth grade teacher, and you just know, you just like, blew a child's mind with something that you dropped. We're all seeing that now with this kind of training. All of a sudden you're just like, you just see the light bulb start to come on. And it's almost one of those spots where you just walk away and say, like, my work here is done. But
Exactly.
you have to engage with it. And I think that is the thing, is you have to be willing to dig in and actually play with it and be okay. There's no such thing as failure with these tools. The failure is your prompt wasn't good, so you didn't get a good output. So you know what you do? You redo your prompt. And folks, that's no different than we've been doing it anyways, because for years you've gone to Google, you put in a search term, you quickly scan the output and you're like, oh, that's not what I was looking for. And you redo your search term. It's the same thing. We're just doing this differently with a prompt engineering. And so if you don't get what it does, you don't say to yourself, well, this thing's broken. I don't know. You try a different prompt, right? What do you need to change? What's it look like? And I'll tell you, the key thing to be looking for when you're prompting, the number one thing is it's all about the verb. This is just a little tidbit for everybody. It's all about the verb you use. And so if you can, I even have classroom teachers now starting to create chat GPT verb lists, right? Like, because the difference between understand and analyze, the difference between evoke and understand, or synthesize, or rewrite, or create, or compose, the verb you use matters than any other part of the prompt. That's just a little tidbit of, as you're getting into your prompt engineering, focus on the verbs.
I know Peter's going to close us out because we're getting close on time. But before he does that, Jeff, can I have you lift it up? We have lots of leaders who are listening right now who are probably very intrigued and very excited about generative AI based on the last 10 minutes and in our conversation. If you were to say, gosh, we're heading into summer, and I heard you say dig in and play. I'm assuming that would be for leaders too. What
Yes.
tip would you say to a superintendent or a principal right now around that? Not necessarily a tip, but a guidance in terms of the learning.
Good question. I think right now, if I put myself in either a superintendent or a school leader role, I would try and leverage it in different ways. Now, remember, and I said this really quickly, but this is just something good that I do in all my trainings, is that it is not a research tool, right? Its job is to create stuff. So if you ask it for something to research, like how many dentists recommend Crest toothpaste, it might get it right and it might make something up, because its job is to create something. It's just going to create a number. If you want true facts, if you're doing research, that's still Google. You're still going to have to know research skills. But if you need to create something, and so I'm thinking through, okay, it's coming to the end of the year. I need to create a staff meeting where I want teachers to do some appreciations. I can go, I'm not going to go to Google and say, can you create a staff meeting outline for me? Because Google won't do that, but ChatGPT will. If I go to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you please help me create a 30-minute, like give it a time frame, 30-minute, 45-minute, whatever it is, a 30-minute staff meeting where every employee gets to give thanks and appreciation to each other or to a colleague. How might I structure that? And it's going to give you some kind of response. Now, it's probably not going to be perfect, but there's probably going to be some things in there you're going to say to yourself, I didn't think about doing it that way. I didn't think about doing it that way. And that's where it starts to push our thinking, because it's not us and we only know what we know. And this thing knows more than what we know. And so it pushes us in that way. And the same from a superintendent. I would be thinking about, how do I leverage this to create these end of the year reflections? If you're doing an end of the year survey, and you've been asking the same questions for years, it's great at coming up with survey questions. I have watched school leaders ask it for survey questions and be blown away of, like, I never thought about asking that question in that way before. And one of the tips is you always ask it for more than you need. So if you're saying, hey, I'd like 5 end of the year survey questions for my para educators, you ask it to give you 20 questions, because out of the 20, you're probably going to find 5 good ones. And the more specific you can be in the prompt of exactly what data do you want to get out of the survey, the better it's going to come up with those questions for you. And then it's as
So
simple as
really,
copying and pasting those over into a Google Doc or a Google Form or something.
so really look at the things that you're doing naturally in your task, and can generative AI help you expand and revise and change that work and make it easier.
Yeah.
So thank
And
you for that.
yeah, and you don't even have to start with something new. If you have a survey, like we'll just use this survey for example, but it works with anything. If you have a survey that you would like to be updated, you can copy and paste that survey into ChatGPT and say, could you help me ask these questions in a different way? Or could you help me reframe these questions that get to the data of X, Y, and Z? And it can support you on, you can give it something to start with. In fact, that's a better way to keep it true, is to give it something to start with and then have it pull from that data itself. So you don't always have to start with scratch. You can take something that you've already been doing, copy and paste it in, and then say, can you support me in making this better or making this different in some way? Is a great way for leaders to start playing with that as well. Yeah.
Jeff, I can't thank you enough. I mean, I'm personally thanking you for being on this because you have dropped so many different strategies just in the time we've been talking. I mean, this is going to be a podcast I think that people are going to want to listen to over and over. But I also, the last thing I just want to ask is a simple one. So you have a podcast series where people can learn from you, and for those of you that, for those listeners that didn't know who you were coming in, they're certainly going to be looking for you at the end of this podcast. So what is your podcast series that you've been doing?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. Yeah, we have a podcast called Shifting Schools. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. I've been podcasting since 2007. So I've been around for a while. We're just about ready to hit 400 episodes. And a lot of the work we're doing right now is focused on supporting AI. In fact, just today, we launched, and we will be doing throughout the month of May, we're calling it our May Mega Prompt Micro Menu, where we are giving you all kinds of starter prompts for you to be able to start playing with and educators to start playing with. And then our podcast right now is breaking down, how do you leverage these? What do these look like in the classroom? What would these look like from a leadership perspective? And so we're really focused on that, and just more of kind of what you heard here over on our podcast as well. We are also have a mini series coming up this summer long. We're doing a whole summer series on the power of play, where we have researchers coming in, and we will be interviewing researchers and talking about the power of play, especially over summer, to support teachers in setting kids up and thinking about how do you really bring in the power of play into our classrooms and supporting kids that throughout our summer. And the last thing I'll say is, if you want to head over to the podcast here soon, you can go back and look through our podcast. But if you want to just see how incredibly cool this is and what students are doing, there are two 11th graders here in the state of Washington that are creating their own AI to support AP students. And they're about ready to go public with their AI. They are right now got themselves into an incubator program in New York. There were over 5,000 companies that applied. They were one of 70 that got in, and they're the first high school students to ever get into this incubator program. So they're taking the whole second semester of school in New York.
Wow.
And they're doing this. And just yesterday, I was talking with them. They've got their first angel check for $20,000. They've already raised $400,000. And it looks like by the time they launch their product, they're going to be evaluated at about $4 million. And they're 11th graders in high school. Folks, that's the power of this stuff. That's the power of teaching kids to be creative, to be critical thinkers. And we just happen to have these two incredible kids who have set up a company. And by company, I mean they have 25 employees, and the oldest one is 17. And that's what's happening right now in the AI space. So you're going to want to go over to the podcast and hear it, because they are just incredibly intelligent kids that you're going to want to hear from, and just make you feel good about the work we do in education.
Jeff, thank you so much for being on the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. This has been informative is not the right word, but I'm just going to use it right now. It's been incredibly informative. Mike, I'll let you close it out.
All right, Jeff, I have one simple question. Grew up on a farm in Eastern Washington. Your parents are listening to this podcast. What's something they would say?
What's something my parents would say? Um, my mom would say, I knew you were going to do something in technology. And I was just talking with her last week, and she'd say that because she said, I knew there was something when you would sit down and put all of your baseball cards into a spreadsheet when you were in fifth grade to see how much they were worth, that I was figuring out formulas and just geeking out, even in elementary and middle school around this stuff. So my mom would say, um, I knew there was something in technology with you. My dad would probably look at me and he'd probably say, um, man, I have no idea what my dad would say. My dad would probably look at me and probably be very proud of the fact that the things that I grew up with on the farm around just figuring stuff out is what I do on a daily basis. Just figure stuff out and keep things moving forward. So thanks for the question.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can tell you as a proud dad of two children, they would be smiling and nodding and indeed be proud. Jeff, thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Oh my goodness, listeners. I hope that you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Peter, did you like it?
Yeah, I felt like I needed to strap on a seatbelt because, you and I have been jumping into AI. We've been sharing articles. We've been reading books on it. We've been using it in workshops. And Jeff, just the way he can explain it, is so fantastic. And it's funny, I heard people in the past talk about the verb thing, but when he started to talk about the verbs and he started to give examples of different verbs to use, that to me was instantly helpful because I have a habit of using the same verbs.
Mhm.
So even with that, I started writing down, ooh, I need to use the word synthesize and stuff. So he can go from practical to big. So like just I,
Nonstop without taking a breath?
I know, and I can't even speak. So I'm not being a really good co-host for you right now, but he's so fluid in going from, small little details to great strategies to the big ideas. Yeah, fantastic.
Well, as we talked about at the beginning, he is so he is the person to lead technology to support students, but also support superintendents. So there, I don't know that he fully realizes, Peter, the gift that he's been given around that. But I think one of my favorite moments is like, as I'm walking out the door, um, my wife tells me, Jeff, don't forget to be a good listener.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, okay, every leader needs that, and that's not technology based. It's like,
yeah,
get to be a good leader, just like that little, level of humility that you need to go in when you're sharing new thoughts with others.
yeah. That definitely connected with me as well because I think the listening piece when you're actually open to listening to what people are saying, you're able to actually give them what they need. And he was able to talk about that. I also thought it was interesting when he told when he said, remember AI is not a research tool. And there's a part of me that's sitting there going, oh, I'm using it incorrectly, because I've tried to do the research thing with it and it doesn't always work out. And he said it's a creation tool. And that I thought was incredibly helpful too. That's what I mean by the strategies. So very interesting guy to talk to, incredibly knowledgeable for sure.
And he's just real. And when he's in front of an audience and he says, dig in and play, he makes it accessible.
Yeah.
So pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, listeners, I think this is going to be one, I hope it's going to be one that we think you're going to go back and listen to again. We certainly will be. Because there are a lot of really good nuggets of information. As always, we're looking for your feedback. We love when people come up to us when we're running workshops or email us and tell us about the podcast. So thank you very much for doing that. We're always looking to hear your feedback, good, bad, the ugly, whatever. But Mike, I am very grateful to be able to co-host this podcast with you. It's good to see you.
It was a lot of fun. Another great interview, Peter. People are going to want to listen to this one for sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Until next time.